Hey, welcome back everybody. Thank you for joining me for another edition of Addicted to Gear. My name's Tony, and as you guys already know, yes, I'm addicted to gear. Today we're looking at a really cool Telecaster, a nice red Road Worn Players Telecaster for you guys. Really cool guitar that I want to talk about. I picked this up not too long ago. I promised I would review it for you guys, so let's start and discuss this baby. Now, I never purchased a red guitar before. I'm not particularly fond of red guitars or anything like that, but I do have a really strong liking for the Road Worn series of guitars. I picked up a Strat a little while ago and I reviewed it for you guys, which I'm really digging. Great guitar. And when this guitar popped up locally, I decided to grab it because I don't have a Telecaster with a humbucker in the neck position. And I figured, hey, I need that sound, right? So I figured, hey, I like Road Worn Strats. I might like a Road Worn Telecaster. So I picked it up and I waited a little while, used the guitar, and I wanted to get familiar with it before I made the review for you guys. And here we are today. So let's start off by talking about what we get. Out of the box, I didn't buy this guitar new, sorry. I rarely buy my guitar new, by the way, because the prices are just getting very, very expensive. I was in a shop locally with a friend just yesterday, and I was complaining about how expensive the guitars have become. It used to be you'd be able to buy a Telecaster or a Stratocaster for under $1,000. Now it's like, you know, you're looking at $1,500 and more. If you want to get something that's made in America, you can possibly still get a guitar that's made in Mexico for a little bit less than that, but they're hovering around the $1,000 mark here in Canada. So I tend to shop used, and I just grabbed this one on my local Kijiji, and I paid it, I think it was under $600 used in Canada, Canadian money. And the guitar is basically made of alder, so it's got a relatively mid-weight alder body, not especially heavy, not especially light. I'd say it's pretty average. Now the guitar is made in Mexico, and I really stopped looking at where the guitars are made a long time ago because I find that today, regardless of where they're made, you can get some really amazing guitars out of Indonesia, out of Korea, out of China, Japan, pretty much everywhere. I mean, you get good ones and you get bad ones. You really just have to play them to see, you know, how well you like them. And just because they're made in the US doesn't mean you're going to bond with them at all. So, you know, for me, a Mexican-made guitar is not a deal breaker by any means. Now, this guitar is designed to offer a little bit of some features that are new, some features that are, when I say new, I mean more modern, and some features that are a little bit more on the vintage side. So let's discuss that. First of all, the neck. One thing I do like about Road Worn necks is the fact that the back of the neck is usually stripped down to a certain degree or sanded down, and it does make the neck feel extremely comfortable. That being said, I don't like the fact that a lot of the Road Worn maple necks are relicked on the fretboard, and I find that the relicking job that they do on the fretboard doesn't look authentic. It really looks bad and quickly done, and I don't like that look. So when I saw that this guitar wasn't actually relicked on the fretboard, to me that was a thumbs up. I was happy to see that because I can basically play it and wear it in myself and make it look more natural. Overall, the neck on this guitar feels really nice. It's a C-shaped neck, and it uses frets that are medium jumbo, 21 frets. The radius is a 9.5 radius neck, so it's not a vintage 7.5 inch radius, and it's not an extremely modern, let's say 10 inch or 12 inch radius. It's kind of a player's guitar. It's not made to be a shredder's guitar. It's not made to offer an extremely flat neck, but it's a very comfortable neck. The C is not a slim C. It's more of a, I don't know if I can say a modern C, whatever that means. All I can say is that the shape is really comfortable in my hand, and it's not as thin as some other guitars that I've had that had C-shaped necks. So just a very comfortable overall feel to the neck. Like most Road Worn maple necks, and also rosewood necks for that matter. What ends up happening is because the finish is sanded off in the back, what ends up happening is the wood is actually exposed to dryness, and the dryness evaporates the moisture in the wood, and oftentimes if you're in a drier climate, you'll get some fret sprout, which means that the ends of the frets will stick out a little bit and will like hurt your fingers as you're going up and down the fretboard. Is that a deal breaker? It's a little bit of a pain to deal with, but it's not a big deal. You can actually just file it down and follow that up with some very, very fine steel wool or sandpaper, and you can get that to be baby smooth in no time. I had to do that with this guitar. It's not the first guitar I had to do that to, but you know, that's just an issue that you sometimes have to deal with the road worn type necks that are kind of exposed. That's one of the reasons why guitar makers typically don't leave the wood exposed like that. Now, the spaghetti logo on the guitar headstock is something that I really like because it reminds me of a vintage Telecaster, Stratocaster. I prefer the spaghetti logo over the fatter Fender logo that came a little bit later. Not a deal breaker, but for me, I don't have any guitars that are actual Fender guitars that don't have the spaghetti logo, and I kind of prefer that logo for some strange reason. The tuners on the guitar are basic cast iron Fender tuners, square shaped. They're not locking tuners or anything like that. I would say they're on par for a guitar of this price point. They don't, if you want to have something that's a little bit better, you can definitely upgrade those tuners to locking tuners. But for me, until they break, I think I'll just leave them as is. The nut on the guitar is a synthetic bone nut, which is basically another way of saying plastic. I would prefer if the actual bone, synthetic bone nut was actually a real bone, but in this case it isn't. I'm not going to bother changing it because it's cut relatively well. It's the right height and I don't need to mess with it, so I'm going to leave it as is for now. When I buy a used guitar, I definitely always have to set it up. I usually use Ernie Ball hybrid slinky strings. These are 9s, and I like my action to be low but not extremely low because I do like to bend a lot and I don't like the frets to fret out the strings. In this particular case, I didn't have to do a lot of work on the frets. They were filed very nicely, crowned very nicely. There wasn't any buzzing or anything like that. I normally check it anyways when I buy a guitar because while I'm in there working, I might as well set it up the way I want it to be. So I didn't have to do anything there. One thing that the guitar did have as an issue, and I don't think this is on par for the guitar, you know, for this model, but this particular used guitar did have this issue, and that was when I was tightening up the truss rod to get the appropriate amount of relief on the neck, I was bottoming out. So basically I wasn't able to go further than what I already was at to be able to get the relief in the range that I needed it. So I basically had to take out the neck and install a little washer and then readjust it. No big deal, but you know, for somebody that doesn't know how to do this stuff, it could be something that is an extra cost and might turn you off to the guitar. So as I mentioned, I don't know if I did mention it, but you know, in my reviews, I'm a straight shooter and I'm gonna tell you what it is. I'm not gonna sugarcoat anything because I don't get a dime from Fender or anybody else. So, you know, if there's an issue, I'll tell you what it is, and I'll tell you whether or not I resolved it and how much it cost, and you know, so you know what's going on. All right, so let's get into the meat and potatoes, which is the fact that this guitar now has a 59 humbucker in the neck position, and it has a really nice sounding Tex-Mex bridge pickup. So the cool thing is you do have the ability now to blend humbucker and single coil sounds in one Telecaster. Here's the thing. As you know, I said it many times before if you've been watching my other videos, I'm really peculiar about the tone of my neck pickup. I really do like a neck pickup that's a little bit brighter sounding. I don't like woolly or muffly or bassy sounding neck pickups, and oftentimes to me, most of them are. This guitar is no different. The 59 Duncan in the neck position was, to my ears, a little bit too woolly, a little bit too muffled sounding, and it's great if you're playing jazz or if you want kind of a little bit of a smoother mellow tone, but I'm more into that rock type music, and I didn't really like it to be that woolly sounding. Now, here's the thing. A lot of times people will make up their minds and not have the pickup height dialed in properly. So A, dial in the pickup height correctly before judging. B, if the pickup still sounds a little bit too muddy or woofy sounding, you can definitely do it more justice by switching out the pot. Now here's the thing. A lot of times when you're dealing with humbuckers, you normally have a volume pot that is in the 500K range. When you're dealing with single coil pickups, you're often in the 250K range. When you have a combination of both in one guitar, it causes a little bit of a dilemma because now you have to kind of make a compromise. So what Fender did in this model was that they kind of split the difference, and instead of going with a 250K, they went with a slightly higher 350K pot. So they kind of split the difference. It's not really a 500, it's not really a 250, it's somewhere in between. Did it work? Kind of, but to me, I actually decided to swap it out and put in a full 500K pot, which I did, and it made the pickup in the neck position sound definitely less woolly. But at the same time, what ends up happening is that now your bridge pickup sounds a little bit too bright. So to compensate for that, you have to choose a cap that kicks in when you're in this position, so that you cut some of the highs, so it doesn't become spiky. So it's a little bit of a workaround, and for that reason, I can't give this guitar full marks because you do have to kind of putz around with it, or at least I did, because that's not the flavor I was looking for, but I got it to work, and that's pretty cool. The other thing here now is that the tone, let me stand up here. The tone and the volume and the switch are reversed. So Fender decided to put out a few guitars like this because I guess some players like to be able to ride the volume knob with their pinky finger and have the volume closer to them as opposed to having the switch closer to them. Now, I'm not one of those guitarists that prefers that. I actually like to have this switch closest to my disposal because I use it a lot more than the volume. So if you want to swap this around, you can definitely flip it over, but here's the thing. Then the volume and the tone knobs are going to be in the wrong position. So if you switch it over, the first knob will now be the tone knob and the volume will be in the back. So you actually have to flip those around as well and basically rewire the whole thing. So it was a little bit of a pain and I didn't feel like doing it, so I just kept it the way it was. But eventually I'm pretty sure I'm going to change that because it's not very practical for me. And here's the other thing. I don't particularly like the what they normally are referred to as top hat style toggle switch cap or knobs. They're bigger than the standard round ones that you see on some of the other Telecasters. And here's the thing, when you put it into the up position, it's a little bit too close to the tone knob. And it really gets in the way when you're trying to find where your knob is for your switch, and it just interferes. So I don't really like that. I'll eventually either change that to a round type, or I'll end up switching the actual metal plates that you see here. There are some third-party vendors that actually make it with the slot for the switch cut at an angle. So instead of being, straight and basically in line, it's actually cut at an angle, kind of like a 45, so the switch is actually out of the way. And that's a good compromise. Now, the rest of the guitar is pretty sweet. The bridge is a 6-saddle type bridge. It's not a vintage 3-saddle type brass vintage bridge that you normally see on some of the reissues. So you can actually adjust in tonality of each of the strings independently, which gives you a little bit more flexibility and is a little bit more precise. So it's pretty cool. If you're looking for a vintage type saddle, well then obviously this is not the one for you. But the fact that the bridge plate is actually a really nice thick piece of metal, and it doesn't have the little returns, so it's a lot more comfortable to play. Your palm doesn't rest against the lips of those the edges of that bridge, because there isn't any. And the bridge is actually nice and flat, and it's going to give you a little bit more sustain and tone. There's nothing worse than a really thin metal bridge plate on a Telecaster. That's where a lot of the issues with feedback and overtones and stuff comes from. And if you're having those issues, the best thing you can do is just remove the plate, sand it completely flat on the bottom of it, and then put it back on your guitar, and those problems will basically go away. So as for the paint job, as we mentioned, is candy apple red, and it's basically a relic job, so you can see that the paint has been worn through in certain places. The cool thing is that you can see that the undercoat is actually gold. So some places it's actually worn down straight to the wood. Some places you can see some of the gold underneath it. You get some, wear and tear here and there. I find it's pretty cool that you can actually see the gold underneath the red. And then when you look at the red itself, you can see that there is definitely a gold undertone to it. There's no checking in this guitar, unlike my Strat, which does have a lot of checking. This one doesn't have any checking at all. And the Pickguard is a black Pickguard. It has basically 8 screws, and you do have the adjustment screws here for the humbucker, so you don't have to remove the Pickguard to adjust that, like you do have to do in some other Telecasters. Of course, the strings go through the body. The input is standard for Telecaster, nothing crazy there. The heel is not carved or anything like that. You don't have a tummy tuck. It's pretty much a standard Telecaster in every other way. And that's about it. I mean, the knobs are very, very smooth. You get a nice sweep to them. Seems pretty solid and well built, and I think it's going to last a long time. So if you're into these relic guitars and you do want to get something that's affordable, unlike the custom shop stuff that Fender's putting out nowadays, you can definitely grab one of these. You can modify them a little bit to your liking. You can roll out them further if you like, or just play them and let them age naturally if you like. Either way, they're great value for the money. Of course, there's those little quirks that I spoke about, but that's not a deal breaker for me. It's just like something that you need to adjust to your taste. But I think overall you can get a lot of mileage out of these guitars, and I'm pretty happy I picked this one up. It really plays really, really nicely. I'm gonna take this for my jam session tomorrow with the guys, and we're gonna kick some butt with this guitar. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you appreciated this review. I hope you enjoyed it and got something educational out of it. And if you want to be notified whenever I post a new video like this, hit the little bell icon and you'll get a little update that tells you that I've posted something new and you should check it out. In the meantime, thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you haven't already subscribed, please do, because there's going to be more great stuff coming your way.